And she set things up nicely because we're going to head to the other side of the aisle now. Illinois Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi joining us now. Congressman, thank you very much. Great to get your take on things, especially after hearing from the Congresswoman. What impact do you think this split government will have on the president's agenda?
Well, it's great to follow Nancy, and Nancy and I work together on different issues, including workforce development and vocational education. But I think it boils down to this, Sandra, which is, do we allow divided government to become gridlock, or does it become a moment where we can come together and get things done? I like to think that we can focus on the latter, and if we do that, we're going to achieve great things for our constituents.
You know, time and time again in the polling leading up to midterm elections, when voters were asked to what do they attribute or to what do they blame for these sky-high prices, inflation, and so often the number one answer was government spending. And most economists do agree that that big government spending did get us to where we are. So do you think Democrats can find some common ground with Republicans to rein in that spending so that we don't end up here again?
You know, I definitely think government spending on things like prescription drugs and so forth contributes to the issue, but so does, as Nancy alluded to, supply chain disruptions, of course, the Ukraine war, and other factors. We have to work on all 3 or 4 of those factors together, and I think if we do, and I know that you're from Illinois and Chicago, if we work in a Midwest way and be practical about this, then we can actually get those prices down and let consumers enjoy more of their dollars.
Practical, I think, is a word a lot of people find comfort in. If it were to actually happen, seeing the two sides work together to especially bring down inflation, okay, we are a week out from Thanksgiving. I can't even believe it, Congressman, but this is happening. And as you well know, prices are up across the board at the grocery store. To put that meal on your family table this year, it's going to cost quite a bit more. And a lot of what goes into those high prices at the grocery is the transportation costs. Companies having to pay for that diesel and gasoline just to move these goods around. What can you commit to? How could you say to Republicans that you are willing to bring those gas prices down when oftentimes what we've seen the solution from this White House is to tap the SPR or this sort of blame game that we've seen? How do you want to bring prices down?
You know, I was just talking about this with Hakeem Jeffries, who, by the way, will potentially make an excellent leader of our caucus in the future. I think that we have to invoke the Defense Production Act, Sandra, with regard to increasing refining capacity. As you might know, global refining capacity and American refining capacity for converting crude oil into gasoline is 1 million barrels per day short. And so increasing that refining capacity using the Defense Production Act would help us to convert more crude into gasoline, thereby lowering prices at the pump. It's a bipartisan issue. We can work on it together. And if we do this, again, people will pay less at the pump.
Now, I want to hit on Hakeem Jeffries in just a second, because that's an interesting point about leadership, and I'd love to pick your brain on that. But first, you do realize that most of those refineries had to come offline, not just because of the pandemic, but then they were told that the goal was zero fossil fuel use by this administration. So they sort of were looking into the future and saying we might not be needed. They were essentially told to shut down some of that capacity. So what messaging are you going to put out there that this is not an administration that wants to bring us to the end of fossil fuel use?
Well, actually, you know, with the Inflation Reduction Act, it actually provides incentives for instance, more oil and gas drilling where there's more solar and wind permits that are granted on federal lands. Similarly, we have to be very practical right now, Sandra, with regard to refining capacity for whatever reason, whether it was weather-related or a business decision by those oil and gas companies. We need to increase that refining capacity right now.
Really interesting response there. Okay, Hakeem Jeffries, so you're throwing the full weight of your support behind his potential leadership of your party in the House. Big shoes to fill for Nancy Pelosi. Is that your choice?
Yes, Hakeem has the intelligence, he has the work ethic, and he has the empathy to bring people together. You know, we're too divided as a country. We need leaders who can bring people together and get things done, and that's what Hakeem Jeffries represents to me, and I'm really excited if he decides to announce his candidacy.
Got it. Congressman, appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.